for today's class. I can see you are complaining that you can't hear. Yes, I was not talking. I was just quiet. I had muted. So now the class has officially started. And sorry for the class has started late. And that one is because of SG. You need to be reminding your teacher about the SG class, the timing. So let's continue with today's topic, AFM. We'll be doing a financing decision. And financing decision, this is one of the widest topic in advanced financial management. We shall look at the cost of capital. Also, we shall look at the theories of the capital structure. Also, we shall look on Modigliani and Miller, those theories. So in this, for today's class, I want us to look at the cost of capital. And immediately, let's go to the whiteboard. Yeah, we are looking at the financing decision, and I want us to start with the cost of capital. And what is the cost of capital? The cost of capital, this is the required rate of return by the investors who have invested their cash in the company. That's what we call the cost of capital. And they include, when we talk about the cost of capital, we focus on the major sources of capital. Number one, they include, number one, we have the cost of equity. Then we also have the cost of preference shares. Cost of preference shares. And number three, we have the cost of the debt. Cost of the debt or the cost of the debentures. Good. Now, those are the major, the cost of capital should be evaluating, the cost of equity, the cost of preference share, and the cost of the debt. So let me start with the cost of equity. Cost of equity. Now, when you say about the cost of equity, now this is the cost by the ordinary shareholder or the ordinary share owners. And in this case, the cost of equity is classified into two. It is classified into two. Number one, we have the cost of retained earnings. Cost of retained earnings. Then also we have the cost of ordinary shares. Cost of ordinary shares. I hope you can hear me from that side. Can you hear me? Mazananiona? Can you hear me? Good. Now let's continue. So we are saying that the cost of the equity is classified into two. We have the cost of retained earnings and we have the cost of the ordinary share. What's the difference? So for the cost of retained earnings is denoted by KR, and this one is denoted by KE, the cost of the ordinary share. So how do we get the cost of retained earnings? The cost of retained earnings, you'll be taking DO, or what you call the previous dividend, 1 plus the growth rate, you divide by PO, or the market price per share, then you add the growth rate. What's DO, what's G, what's PO? Now, we have said that DO is the most recent dividend per share. This is the most recent dividend per share. G, it's our growth rate. And PO is the market price per share. Also, sometimes you may given D1. What's D1? Now, the D1 is equivalent to DO, 1 plus growth rate. And that's what we call the expected dividend per share. So I'm saying that this one, DO 1 plus G, you get the expected dividend, which is also denoted by D1. Now that's the expected dividend per share. And we are saying that G is the growth rate. So sometimes you may not be given the growth rate. How do we get the growth rate? If you're not given the growth rate, this is how you compute the growth rate. Growth rate, use what we call the growth rate method, which is, or the compounding method. It's DN, you divide by DO, nth root minus 1, where DN is the most recent. So in this case, the DN will be for the growth rate. The DN will be presenting the most recent dividend. DO will be presenting the initial dividend paid. This is what I mean. Assuming you have 3 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4 years. Assuming this was 6, and here you have 10. So when getting the growth rate, our DN, you take the most recent at the 4th year, which will be 10. You divide by DO. Now this what will be your DO, the initial or the first dividend paid. Then N, if you have 4 years, your N becomes 3, because this is how we compute the growth. 1, 2, 3. Now that's how you get the nth when you're getting the growth rate. Now that's out number 1 of the cost of retained earnings. Then we also say that we have the cost of ordinary share, KE. How do we get KE? Now the cost of ordinary share and the cost of retained earnings, the formula is the same. The only difference is that in this case, it will be DO, 1 plus the growth rate, you divide by PO, but in this case, you deduct the flotation cost, then you add the growth rate, where F is the flotation cost or the issuing cost. The issuing cost. Now, that's the cost incurred when raising the funds. So now what you'll note that the difference between the two, the cost of the retained earnings and the cost of ordinary share, the formula is the same. The only difference is that for this case, for the ordinary share, you are deducting the flotation cost. Good. So those taking screenshot, you can screenshot that, but don't worry, you have the notes for everything I'm covering, so you don't have to copy. So that was number 1, the cost of equity, and we have said that they're classified into 2. We have the cost of retained earnings, and we have the cost of ordinary shares, and that's how you analyze that. Good. Now let's go to the second part. The second part, I want us now to look at the cost of preference shares. Now, the cost of preference share, that's the required rate of return for the investors in the preference shares. So we are looking at number 2, cost of preference shares. It's noted by KP. When you talk about the cost of preference share, we have said that is the required rate of return by the preference shareholders. And how do we get the cost of preference share? The cost of preference share, KP, is equals to interest or the dividends, the dividend per share, you divide by the value of the preference share, you rest the flotation cost in case there is, and then you multiply by 100%, where we have said that VP is the value of the preference share. It's the value of preference share. Good. Then we go to number 3. We say that they are classified into 3. Now we go to the cost of the debt. The cost of the debt. Stroke, it's also the cost of debentures or the cost of the bond. Now, when you're looking at the cost of the bond or the cost of the debt, is denoted by KD. This is the required rate of return by the debt holders. And for this case, they are classified into 2. They are classified into 2. 1, or A, in case of irredeemable debenture, irredeemable debt, or we can say just irredeemable debt. And number B, in case of redeemable debt or redeemable debenture. Now, the difference between irredeemable and redeemable. Now, for irredeemable, They are debenture or they are the debt which has no specific maturity period. So you're saying has no specific maturity period. But for redeemable, they are debenture with specific maturity period. So they have specific maturity period. And for this redeemable debenture or redeemable debt, it's also known as the yield to maturity. Yeah, yield to maturity. So now those are the two classifications of the cost of the debt or the cost of the debenture. We have said that irredeemable, they are those debt which have no specific maturity period or with has no maturity period. And how do we get that? In that case, the cost of the debt in case of irredeemable, you take the interest, you divide by the value of the debt, then 1 minus t. Remember, the interest is always allowable for tax. So you take the interest, you divide by the value of the debt, 1 minus tax. That's how you get the irredeemable debt. Now, when we talk about the redeemable debt, it's also known as the yield to maturity. This one is the yield to maturity with specific maturity period. So in this case, how do we get the cost of the debt? The cost of the debt or yield to maturity, you take the interest plus maturity value minus the value of the debt, 1 over n, you divide by the maturity value plus the value of the debt, 1 over 2, then 1 minus the tax. That's how you get that, where they have said that what's MV and what's VD. MV is our maturity value. And note that for the redeemable debts, they usually have what we call it's a fixed covenant. So the maturity value, it's always at par value. So the redeemable debt, note that they always mature at their par value. Then VD is the value of the debt or the current value. This is the current value of the debt, current value of the debt. Then we have T. T is the tax rate. T is the tax rate. So that's how we evaluate that. And that's the cost of the debt or the cost of the debenture. And then another thing you need to note there, let me write an NB there. Assuming you are given or you ask about the, assuming you are having a loan, either a bank loan. Bank loan usually is attached to interest rate. If you want to get the cost of the loan, I'm saying that in case of a loan, how do we get the cost of the debt? The cost of the debt, you just take the interest rate 1 minus t. Now that cost, the interest rate will give rise to the cost of the debt, that interest rate. Good. Another thing you need to note is that, that's NB1. Number 2, that the interest is computed based on par value. Yeah, can you hear me? Some are complaining they can't hear me. Nicholas, can you hear me now? Okay, can anyone hear me? Just type yes or no. Then we are okay. So it's all about Nicholas. Look at your settings. Good. I can see he is okay now. Good. We are saying that in case of our own, this is how we get the cost of the debt. You just take the interest rate 1 minus t, and for the interest will be computed based on the par value. That's another thing you need to note. Good. So I'm about to wrap that. So for those taking notes, you can screenshot that. But I highly recommend you just stay put. Just answer my question. You don't have to write. So now I want us to look at another item. So we are through evaluating the cost of the various sources of capital for the equity, for the preference shares, and for the debt. So now we want us to look at how do we get the cost of the capital. Now, when you say about the cost of capital, you are told that the company cost of capital is 10%. How do they determine that 10%? They usually determine that 10% by determining what we call the weighted average cost of capital, or what we call the WACC. Weighted average cost of capital. That's WACC. Now that's how we determine our cost of capital. And this is the overall. This is the average overall. Average overall cost of funds for the existing, source of fund or source of capital for the existing capital. Is the average overall cost of the fund for the existing, it should be for the existing capital. So, and how do we get that? So the concept of the weighted average will be applied when you're getting the weighted average cost of capital. This is what I mean. When you want to get the weighted average cost of capital, we are saying that you are getting the average of overall cost of the fund. And we say that the cost of the fund or the cost of capital is classified into 3. So you take the weight of equity, cost of equity, then you add the weight of preference, cost of preference, plus weight of the debt, cost of the debt. But for the debt, it's always net of tax. It's allowable for tax. Now that's how we get the WACC. And what you get here as the WACC, that's what the company usually, when you are getting NPV or when you are discounting cash flows, what you get here is what you usually use as part of cost of capital or the required rate of return. So the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of preference, cost of preference, weight of the debt, cost of the debt. And you have seen that the W is just the weight. Another thing, we also have what we call the weighted marginal cost of capital. That's WMCC. And for the WMCC, you can say is the overall cost of the new funds to be raised by the company. And how do we get the WMCC? WMCC, the formula is the same. It's just the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of preference, cost of preference, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus the tax. The formula is the same. The only difference comes in is that for the WACC is the average cost of the existing funds, but for the WMCC is the overall cost of the new funds. So that's the difference, but the formula is the same. So the application is the same. So that means for the WACC, if you are looking at the existing funds, that means we'll not consider the flotation cost. Remember, we said that flotation cost is the cost of issuing new funds. But in this case, we are dealing with the existing funds, so we'll not be considering the flotation cost. When we talk about the WMCC, we're always focusing on the new funds. So in this case, we'll also have to factor the flotation cost. So that's the difference between the two, the WACC and the WMCC. Or we can just, let me just give you an overall of the differences. Let's look at the differences between WACC and WMCC. So on one side, I can write WACC, the other side, WMCC. One of the difference is that this one is the average, is the cost of the existing fund. Cost of existing funds. But on the other side is the cost of the new funds. That's one of the difference. Another difference, we have said that this one, or WACC, does not consider flotation cost. Does not consider flotation cost. But in this case, it considers flotation cost. Another difference also we can look is that when this one is used when to evaluate new project, used in evaluating existing projects, or be used as a cost of capital in evaluating the existing project. But for the WMCC, used in evaluating new projects. Then another thing, for the WACC, does not consider the cost of retained earning. Does not consider cost of retained earnings. But on the other side, it considers the cost of retained earnings. Good. So another one we can say, but I'm not writing it. For the WACC, it uses the weighted average. To get the proportion, we use the weighted average. That's for the WACC. But for WMCC, we use the target capital structure. So in this case, we are saying that we are using the target capital structure. That's in determining the weight or the proportion. But for the WACC, we use the market or the weighted, the market weighted average or the market weighted average. That's another difference. Good. So you can screenshot that before we go to the next item. Good. So now let's look at something else. We look at what we call the break-even point, or what we call the critical point. Now, when you talk about the break-even point or the critical point, this is a point where a given source of capital is finished or is exhausted, and the investor opts to go for the next expensive source of capital. So we are saying that is a point where a given source of capital is finished. or is exhausted, and the investor opts to go for the next expensive source of capital. Now that's what we call the break-even point or the critical point. And this is how it works. Now, the cheapest source of capital in any organization is the retained earning. Remember, in the retained earning, we have no flotation cost. So the cheapest source in Akwanga, the cost of retained earning. If the retained earning is exhausted or is finished, in that case, the investor or the company, now they opt to issue shares. So unatoka kwa cost of retained earnings, unaenda now to the cost of ordinary shares. If the ordinary share is exhausted, you go to the next expensive, which is a fixed covenant. You go and issue the cost of preference share. Preference shares ikisha, now that's when you can go to the other expensive, which is the cost of the debt or the cost of the debenture. Now, at what time do you know that now you need to move from the cost of retained earning, you go to the cost of ordinary share? Now, that point when you realize now you need to issue more shares from the retained earnings, that's what we call the break-even point or the critical point. And how do we get that? How do we get the break-even point or the critical point? So in this case, you just take the amount to raise, you divide by the weight or the proportion. The weight or the proportion. That's how you determine the break-even point or the critical point. Then, when evaluating the projects, because you'll be asked when to accept or when to reject the project. So what are the decision criteria we use? Decision criteria. And for the decision criteria, it's all about when to accept, when to reject. So if WACC or stroke WMCC is greater than the internal rate of return, what do you expect? Should you accept or reject? So based on what you think, you can post your answer there. If the WACC or WMCC is greater than internal rate of return, should you accept or should you reject that project? Yeah, I'm waiting for your answers. Yeah, correct. You should reject. You reject. But if the WACC or WMCC is less than IRR, or it means that if the internal rate of return is greater than the WACC or the WMCC, so in this case, you can accept the project. But if they are equal, the WACC or the WMCC is equal to the internal rate of return, that's what we call, it's a point of indifference. Point of indifference. That means you can either accept or you can either reject. So this is what you'll be using to determine whether to accept or reject the project. Remember the WACC, that's the cost, and the internal rate of return is what you expect to get the return. So assuming the internal rate of return is 12, but the WACC or the cost was 10. You see, if the cost was 10 and you're getting a return of 12, in that case, you should accept the project. This is what you're talking about. If IRR is greater than WACC, you should accept, and vice versa. Good. So that's the analysis of the cost of capital. Just assuming you have no question, because I have not seen any question posted there. Now I wish to introduce illustration, to do an illustration. Let's do a one comprehensive illustration with 20 marks. If you have your past papers, want us to do this. June 27. June 27, question 2. I'm sure some of the students don't have this question. Their past papers start from September 2015, but don't worry. The handout that I had sent to you, it already contained this question. It's already indicated there. So don't you worry. So June 27, question 2. There is the question. And we are told that the management of Mapema Limited are in the process of determining the optimal capital budget of the company for the year ended 30th June 2008. The following information is available. Number 1, the profit after tax for the year ended 30th June 2008 is estimated to be 22.5. That's the profit after tax. Number 2, dividend payout ratio is 40%. So if you're given a dividend payout ratio, so that one can enable you to get the retained earnings. Before tatusome tena, I'm doing June 27, question 2. We are told that, note number 1, the profit after tax is expected to be 22.5 million. Then number 2, we are told that the dividend payout ratio is 40%. If we pay 40% of the dividend, that means we retain the 60%. That means our retained earnings will be 60% of 22.5. And how much will you get for that? That means you'll get 13.5 million. That becomes your retained earnings. Go back to the question. That was number 2. Number 2, the dividend payout ratio is 40%. Number 3, the ordinary share of the company are currently trading at the stock exchange at 80 per share. That's PO, or the market price per share. Number 4, the ordinary shareholders expect a dividend of 6 per share for the year ending 30th June 2008. They expect. Now, that's D. We said we have DO and we have D1. So will this be D1 or DO? DO or D1? To connote number 4. The ordinary shareholder expect a dividend of 6 per share for the year ending 30th June 2008. Will that be DO or D1? Yeah, that one should be D1. We said that DO is the most recent or the previous dividend, but D1 is what you expect. In this case, we are given what we expect. Number 4, the ordinary share expect a dividend of 6 per share for the year ending 30th June 2008. Number 5, the annual growth rate of dividend is 6% per annum. That's our G. Number 6, the flotation cost amount to 8 per ordinary share issued. That's our F, and that one is for the ordinary share capital. Number 7, the company could issue an unlimited number of 11% preference share at 96 per share. The par value per share is 100. Number 8, the company could obtain bank loan of up to 24 million at a pre-tax interest rate of 10% per annum. I showed you how to get the cost of the debt in case of a loan. Thereafter, an unlimited amount of bond could be issued under the following terms. Number 1, coupon interest rate 12% per annum, par value 1,000 per bond, discount 30 per bond, Flotation cost, 20 per bond. Maturity period, 10 years. Now that's what we call redeemable bond or yield to maturity because you're already given the maturity period. Number 9, the optimal capital structure of the company comprises 15% debt, 40% preference share capital, and 45% equity. Hiyo hata bila kuendelea, the examiner wants WMCC. Why? When I was given the difference, nilisema that WACC, to get the weight, you use the market or the fair value. But for the WMCC, you use the optimal or the target capital structure of which you are given there. Number 10, corporation tax rate is 30%. Required, number 1. The cost of capital for each of the sources of finance available to Mapema Limited. So to answer your number 1, the cost of capital for each source of finance available to Mapema. So in this case, we have gotten all the 3 sources. Kuna equity, we have the preference, and we have the debt. So tuanze hapo, we start with cost of equity. And we say that for the cost of equity is classified into 2. We have the cost of retained earnings, or we say that, how do we get this one? It's DO 1 plus the growth rate, you divide by PO plus growth rate. Also, the cost of ordinary share, we said it's DO 1 plus growth rate, you divide by PO, but for ordinary share, you have to factor in the flotation cost and then you add the growth rate. Then we said DO 1 plus D is the same as D1. So in this case, we are given our D1. That's courtesy of note number 4. Number 4, umeambiwa, ordinary share expect a dividend of 6 per share for the year ending 30th June 2008. Then, let's go to note number 5. The annual growth rate of dividend is 6 per annum. That's our G. Number 6, flotation cost amount to 8 per ordinary share issued. That's our flotation cost. And then let's go back to note number 3. Ordinary shares of the company are currently trading on the stock exchange at 80 per share. That's our PO. So, tumeona DO, 1 plus D already given, what they expect. And you are given it's 6. Hiyo ni yote. Hata hapa ni 6. You divide by PO, we are given our PO, the market price per share is currently trading at 80. Hata hapa ni 80. But for ordinary share capital, you have to deduct the flotation cost. And you are given the flotation cost was 8. That was note number 6. Flotation cost is 8. Then you add the growth rate. And we are told that note number 5, the annual growth rate of dividend is 6% per annum. You add 6%, 0.006, 0.006. You can get it into percentage. So this one you get 13.5%, and this one you get 14.3%. Good. Now let's go to another item. That was the cost of equity. Now we go to cost of preference shares. Cost of preference shares. Under the cost of preference share, we say that, how do we get the cost of preference share? The cost of preference share, you take the interest of the dividend, over the value of the preference minus flotation, in case there is a flotation, and then you multiply by 100%. Let's go to note number 7. Note number 7. Number 7, you are told that the company could obtain bank loan. Number 7. The company could issue unlimited number of 11% preference share at 96 per share. The par value per share is 100. So just get the interest of the dividend. So can you give me the interest? Give me the interest, Apo. How much will be the interest? To note number 7. Interest on the preference share ni ngapi? Yeah, the interest should be 11, not 11.5. Should be 11. Remember I said that for the interest, we compute interest based on the par value. So you are supposed to take 11%, and then you are told that the par value is 100. So it's just 11% of 100. Then the 96, you see, we are told that the preference share at 96, that's the PO. It will be trading at 96, but the par value is 100. So if we come back here, the interest, tumeona, it's 11% of the 100, the par value. You divide by, it will be trading at 96. Hii 96 washatoa paka flotation cost, because we're not given the specific flotation cost. And then you multiply by 100. Good. So someone is saying there is no, kindly look at your connection. Mwenye nasema no sound. Si nimeuliza swali na mkanijibu. So that means you can hear me. So kindly look at your sound. Monio. So, and in this case, you'll get 11.5%. Then we go to the other one. That's number 2. Number 3, we go to the cost of the debt. Now, for the cost of the debt, in our question, they are classified into 2. Number 1, we have the cost of the debt in respect to the loan. And also we have another cost of the debt based on the redeemable bond. That's the yield to maturity. And you see that, how do you get the yield to maturity? Is the interest plus maturity value minus the value of the debt, then 1 over n. You divide by maturity value minus plus the value of the debt, then you get the average by dividing by a half, 1 minus the tax. So tutafuta interest kwanza. Now let's go to note number 8. Number 8. Number 8, you are told that the company could obtain a bank loan of up to 24 million at a pre-tax interest rate of 10% per annum. Now, for the loan, we already given the cost. Kwa hivyo hiyo itakuwa ngapi? In case of loan, there, you see we are told that it will be issued at 10%. That's pre-interest, pre-tax. So kwa hivyo hapa itakuwa 10, which is the 10%. 1 minus the tax rate. The tax rate was 30%, 0.3. Kwa hivyo itakuwa 7%. Then still at number 8, that the company could obtain a bank loan of up to 24 million at a pre-tax interest rate of 10% per annum. Thereafter, an unlimited amount of bond could be issued under the following terms. The coupon interest rate is 12% per annum. Par value is 1,000 per bond. Discount 30. Flotation cost 20. Maturity period 10 years. So, whatever interest is just 12% of the par value, which is 1,000. So it's 12% of 1,000, which is 120. So our interest, we have seen that is 12% of 1,000, and you get 120. So now let's come here to this formula. You take the interest, which is 120 plus the maturity value ni ngapi? How much was the maturity value? No, remember we said that maturity value is the same as par value. You see, these are what we call the fixed covenant, of which they mature at the par value, and the par value was 1,000, this 1,000. Minus the value of the debt. The value of the debt is 950. You divide by, you multiply by 1/n. In this case, our n, the maturity period was 10 years. So divide by 10. Then you divide by maturity value plus the value of the debt. Ni hii tu, but unaweka plus, it's 1,000 plus 950. Then you get the average. And then 1 minus t. It's 1 minus 0.3. So if you know how to use a calculator, kindly compute this. And make sure you compute this, because most of the students will get a wrong answer. So kindly observe the rules of BODMAS. And give me your answers there. And in case you have a question, unauliza hapo. I already have an answer there. Yeah, it should be 9%. 7 getting 9%. Someone is asking, where did I get 950? This 950, eh? So, tuangalie hapa. That's the value of the debt. Eh? So, this will get the value of the debt. 950. I want to answer that question. To note number 8. Coupon interest rate is 12% per annum. The par value is 1,000. But there is a discount, tunapea discount ya 30 na flotation cost ya 20. Kwa hivyo, how much will you fetch from the market? It's 1,000. You minus the discount of 30 and flotation of 20. So it's 1,000 minus 50, and you get 950. That's how you're getting the value of the debt. Just hoping we are okay now, Sarah. Good. So now we can go to the part B of the question. Part B of the question. The breakpoints in the marginal cost of capital MCC schedule in respect to retained earning and the debt. The breakpoint in the marginal cost of capital schedule with respect to the retained earnings and the debt. So it's all about the breakpoint. How do we get the breakpoint? We say that the breakpoint, you take the amount raised, you divide by the weight of the proportion. And the examiner is specific in respect to equity or in respect to retained earnings and the debt. How do we get that? Tuanze na retained earnings. Tukuje hapa. We had already note number 1 and note number 2. We are given information which helped us to get the retained earnings. And the retained earnings, tulichukua the profit after tax times 60%, the retention ratio, and we got 13.5. So for the retained earning, you take 13.5 million, you divide by the proportion. Proportion, let's go to note number 9. Number 9, you are told that the optimal capital structure of the company comprises 15% debt, that means the debt is 15%, 40% preference share, and 45% equity. Remember, retained earning, it's part of the equity. So here for the retained earning, it's 13.5, you divide by the weight. Weight, retained earning is part of the equity, and you're told it's 45%, it's 0.45. Then we come to the debt. Now for the debt, note number 8, that's why you're given the information. Number 8, the company could obtain loan of up to 24 million. Now for the debt, the specific amount given, remember for the debt we have two, we had the loan and we have for the bond. So when getting the breakpoint, you get the breakpoint based on what you are given the specific amount. Like for the bond, you are not given, but you are given for the loan. The same thing we have done for the equity, the cost of equity. Remember the cost of equity, we said that we have the cost of ordinary share and we have the cost of retained earnings. Based on the two, we had already been given the retained earning. Yeah? You get the breakpoint for what you have the specific amount. So for the debt, for the debt, you can raise 24 million. You divide by the weight. The weight for the debt was 15%. So 0.15. So what do you get for the retained earning? How much is the breakpoint for retained earnings? Yeah, this one is 30 million. What about for the debt? Yeah, it's 160. Na kuna wenye wanasema wanisikii. Na mnatoa na wenye wananipea answer si wanasikia eh? So usiponisikia, no, it's your side, not my side. For us, we are okay. This is one of the best studio we have here. So now that's the breakpoints. Hoping we are good. Now let me explain what the breakpoint means. Now, for example, for the retained earnings, this one is the equity. Let me take you back here. The cost of retained earnings and the cost of ordinary share. Kulikuwa na cost of retained earnings and the cost of ordinary share. This was 13.5 and this was 14.3. I'm just copying the way it is here. What this means is that retained earnings, the breakpoint is that million. That means anything below that million qua equity, we can afford using the retained earning. Anything below that million for the equity, we can afford using the retained earning. That means anything below that will finance at 13.5%. Ikishapita 30 kwa equity, ikipita 30, you go to the next expensive source, which is now ordinary share, which is expensive at 14.3%. I repeat again. For the equity, remember these are the equity. The breakpoint for the retained earning is 30. Anything below 30, we use the cost of retained earning, which is cheaper at 13.5%. Anything above 30 for equity, now that's when we go to the to issue ordinary share, which is somehow expensive at 14.3%. Twende kwa debt. Now the debt here given, the 24 was for the loan. Ilikuwa loan. Remember for the debt we had two items. We have the loan at 7% and we have the debenture, I mean the debt, I mean the bond. We are here. You see the cost of the loan was 7%, but the yield to maturity for the bond was 9%. So the cost of the debt for the loan it's 7%, and the cost of the debt for the bond it's 9%. The 24 million was for the loan. That means if you go to the debt, anything below 160, we can be able to afford using the loan or the cost of the loan, which is 7%. It exceeds, ikipita 160 million and above, that's when we go to the next expensive source, which is now the cost of the bond at 9%. I'm hoping now you have something, Good. So in an exam, you're not supposed to explain this, The question was just asking the breakpoint. So this one I'm trying to explain to prepare you on how to determine the WMCC. Now we can go to part C. Kindly you said that you don't copy, so that you don't float. Let's go to part C of the question. Part C, you are told that the marginal cost of capital at each break point identified in B above. The WMCC at the break point identified in B above. Good. So takuja hapa. So in this case, they want the WMCC. And how do we get the WMCC? The WMCC is the weight of equity, cost of equity, plus weight of preference, cost of preference, plus weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus the tax. Then how many WMCC will you compute? Now this is how you determine how many WMCC to compute. Unaangalianga hii breakpoint. The breakpoint will guide you. So the first one will be between 0, breakpoint ni mbili. Unachukua the minimum, which is 30. Now anything above 30 to 160, and then the other one is above 160. That's how you determine how many WMCC will you compute. Tumesema unaanza 0, unachukua the least breakpoint, which is 30, then anything above 30 to 160, and then anything above 160. So you take the weight of equity, note number 9. Number 9, you already given the proportion there. The capital structure of the company comprises 15% debt, 40% preference share, and 45% equity. Unote hiyo. So tuanze na equity. So the weight of equity is 45%, 0.45, 0.45, 0.45. Then you multiply by cost of equity. Now the cost of equity tukuje hapa ndizo hizi bili. We said that, you see, tulikuwa tunatumia retained earning. This is the equity. Anything below 30, we use the cost of retained earning, which is 13.5. Anything above 30, that's when we go to the ordinary share at 14.3%. So between 0 to 30, that means we use 13.5. What about between 30 to 160? Is it 13.5 or 14.3? Post your answer up on haraka. I want the cost of equity between 30 to 160. Yeah, now it should be 14.3. It has already exceeded 30. So it's 14.3, even above 160, still above 30. So it will still be 14.3. Then you add the weight of preference. The weight of preference was 40%. Kwa hivyo itakuwa 0.4 times the cost of preference. Preference hainaga maneno mingi. That one is always standard. So, and here we had the cost of preference. The cost of preference was 11.5%. So 11.5. Then you add the weight of the debt. The weight of debt was 15%, 0.15, 0.15, 0.15. Then you multiply by the cost of the debt, net of tax. Now, for the cost of the debt, here we had the debt. The loan, we had a limit or the break of 160. So anything below 160, tutatumia the cost of the loan, which is 7%. Anything above 160, that's when we go to 9%. So between 0 to 30, hiyo iko below 160. Kwa hivyo tutatumia the cost of the loan, which is 7%. 30 to 160 is still below, within 160. So still be 7. Anything above 160, that's when we go to the cost of the debt at 9%. And then you get the answer. Then here you have 1 minus t. Don't minus 1 minus t here, because when you are getting their cost upper, they're already net of tax. You see, this one is 1 minus t. Also here we had 1 minus t. They're already net of tax. So usikuja kuitax tena hapo. That's how you get that. And what do you get there? So this one you get 11.72%, 12.1%. This one you get 12.38%. Good. Now let's go to part D of the question. Part D of the question, you are told that the company has the following investment opportunities for the year ending 30th June 2028. We have the investment there, we have the cost, we have the internal rate of return. All the projects are divisible. Then number one, required number one, with the aid of IRR or WMCC schedule, determine the project that the company should be accepted by the company. You determine the project to be accepted by the company. There is something we had said that for you to accept the project, how do you determine the project to accept? For you to accept the project, only accept. You accept if the internal rate of return is greater than the WMCC. Then you need to note that when you're evaluating the project, you rank them in the order of IRR. Rank the project in the order of IRR. What do we mean? Like in this case, you are given the investment here, the cost, and the IRR. So that means the project with the highest IRR, you'll give it the first priority. That means it has the highest return. For example, which is the highest, which one will you give the first priority? Rank number one will be which project? Angalia IRR, and then you tell me which project will you give the first priority. Yeah, you see we have the 16.5. That's project number 4. That's how you argue. And then you see you are told that with the aid of IRR or MCC schedule, how do we prepare that? So IRR or WMCC schedule. Now that's how we prepare this. You bring your ranks there. We had 7 projects. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you bring those projects there. Like for example, tumeona rank number 1 will be project number 4. Then you get its cost, and then you accumulate the cost. You get the accumulated cost. To get the accumulated cost, you compare now IRR against WMCC, and then you comment on whether to accept or when to reject. So nataka turank hizi project zote. Muna rank naandika. So number 1, rank number 1 was 16.5. Number 4. Number 2 ni gani? Nastaki IRR, nataka in project. Rank number 2. Hiyo ni kazi ya macho, Yeah, it's 3. Then rank number 3. Hiyo ni project 5. Rank number 4 ni project 1. Rank number 5 ni number 7. Rank number 6, hiyo ni project 6 bado. Rank number 7. Rank number 7 ni gani? Niyo ya mwisho, which is 2. Yeah. That's what I have done. I've just ranked your projects there. Then you indicate their cost. For example, the first one, number 4, project number 4. Number 4 requires a capital of 20. Inataka capital ya 20, unaandika tu hapo 20. Then the other one was number 3. Number 3 nayo inataka ya ngapi? Ya 15. Then number 4 inataka 45. Number 1 inahitaji 10. Number 7, project number 7 inahitaji 30. Project 6, it requires 60, and 2 ina require 50. As easy as that. And then you accumulate the cost. Hiyo ni 20. 20 plus 15, you get 35. 35 plus 45, you get 80. 80 plus 10, you get 90. 90 plus 30, you get 120. 120 plus 60, you get 180. 180 plus 50, you get 230. Then we go to the IRR. Project 4 had the highest, and the IRR was 16.5%. Project 3, unachukua IRR yake ilikuwa ngapi? Project 3, the IRR was 12.9. Now that's what I'm doing. So that's 12.9. Hiyo ingine ilikuwa na 12.09. Was it? Yeah, 11.8, sorry. 11.8. Hiyo ingine number 4 ilikuwa na 11.2. The other one was 10.5. It was 10.1, and last year we had 9.7. Good. Now, you already have IRR. Then, tukuje kwa WMCC. And I need your attention here. How do you get the WMCC? Now, for you to get the WMCC, we use the accumulated cost. This is what I mean. Unakuja hapa. This is what we had computed as WMCC. For example, tuangalia kwanza, project 4, the accumulated cost is 20. Unakuja hapa, unaangalia. The cost between 0 to 30, MCC yake ilikuwa 11.72. So you get 11.72. Unakuja, the second one, the accumulated is 35. 35, you see that 5 is between 30 to 160. So WMCC will be 12.1. So that's 12.1. The other one is 80. 80 bado iko in between 30 to 160. Kwa hivyo WMCC still remains at 12.1. 90, 12.1. 120, 12.1. We have 180 here. 180, it's now above 160. That means its WMCC will be 12.38. 12.38. Also to 30, it's above that, so it will be 12.38. Now with that, you can comment. The question was which project to accept, which one to reject. Tuanze ni ya kwanza. Tumesema only accept if IRR is greater than WMCC. IRR yako ni 16.5, MCC ni 11.72. So this one is greater than this one, so that one you should accept. 12.9, 12.1. Also that one you should accept. 11, 9, 12. Hiyo ukachana nayo. Hata hiyo achana nayo. Hata hiyo. Even that, reject it. Even that one, you reject it. You're comparing the IRR and WMCC. So, if you are told to get the optimal capital or optimal capital budget, you see you have accepted only 2 projects. Hii na hii, So that's project 4 and project 3. This one requires a cost of 20. Also, we expect project 3, which requires a cost of 15. And if you add the 2, the accumulated cost is 35. It's just 20 plus 15, you get 35, the accepted project. And that was the question on number 5, part 2. Yeah, number 2, you're told that determine the company's optimal capital budget for the year ending 30th June 2008. So we have seen it's 35 million. So those taking a screenshot, you can take a screenshot. That's the end of that question. Imeisha hivyo. So we can start, we can try another question. Let's do May 2017, question 1B. May 2017, question 1B. So we start with part A of the question. Explain 2 ways in which increased investment in corporate social responsibility activity might enhance the value of the firm. Hiyo mwambie mwalimu SG amuonyeshe. So let's go to part B of the question. Part B, you are told that KCE Limited has a foreign capital structure, which it considers optimal under both the present and the forecasted condition. We have the source of capital, we have long-term debt, and we have the equity capital. So in this case, they don't have any preference share. The management of KCE Limited forecast the after-tax earning for the forthcoming year at 2.5. The company has been paying 60% of the earning as dividend, and this payment rate is expected to continue in the foreseeable future. Can you give me the retained earning, Apple? Compute the retained earnings for me. How much would be the retained earnings? Yeah, the retained earning is 1 million. You just take the profit after tax, which is 2.5. You multiply by, if they have been paying 60% as dividend, that means they are retaining the 40%. So it's just 40% of 2.5 and you get 1 million. Good. Then you are told that the company present loan commitment will allow it to incur additional leverage according to the schedule presented below. So we have the loan amount. Between 0 to 500, it's 9%. Between 500 and 9 million, rate nenda due at 11%. And anything above 900,000, you get it at 13%. The company corporate tax rate is 30%. The current market price of the equity share for the company is 22 of the company is 22. That's the PO. The last dividend on equity share was paid at 2.2 per share, and the expected growth rate is 5%. Hiyo ni G. Na tumepewa F. Na tumepewa DO. New shares, a new equity share can be sold at a flotation cost of 10% of the issue price. So hata before tuendelee, let's evaluate as we read. Number one, we have gotten the retained earnings as 2.5 times 40%, and you get 1 million. Now, can I get the cost of retained earnings and the cost of ordinary share? Hii tukasema is DO 1 plus growth rate, PO plus G. This one is DO 1 plus G PO, but you raise the flotation cost plus the growth rate. We got that? We are told that the company corporate tax rate is 30%. The current market price of the equity share for the company is 22. That's the PO. The last dividend on equity share to be paid was 2.2. Now the 2.2 is your DO per share, and the expected growth rate is 5%. New equity share can be sold at a flotation cost of 10% of the issue price. So DO, it was 2.2, 1 plus the growth rate. And you are given the growth rate as 5%, 0.05, 0.05. Then you divide by PO. The market price per share is 22. Lakini hapa itakuwa 22. We have the flotation cost of 10%. So you can decide to do this. You can take 22 minus 10% of 22, or as a sharp student, you just multiply by 90%. So nitumie ile rahisi. Tumesema flotation cost is 10% of the issue price. It's 10%, you minus 10% of 22, which is the same as doing 22 times 90%. Then we add the growth rate. The growth rate was 5%, 0.05, 0.05. Then what you get, you multiply by 100% because you are getting the cost in percentage form. So this one will get 15.5%. And this one you are getting 16.67%. So let's continue with the question. KCE Limited has the foreign investment opportunity for the coming year. So we have the projects, we have the annual cash outlay, hiyo ni outflow, annual net cash flows, project life, and then we have internal rate of return, that's IRR. Required, the amount in shillings at which break in the marginal cost of capital schedule occur. Yeah, that's all about the break point, the break-even point. So number 1, it's asking about the break point. And you say that, how do we get the break point? It's all about the amount raised, you divide by the weight or the proportion. Then, whenever they have not specified, you use what you are given. For example, in this case, you already have the retained earnings. That means one of the breakpoints we'll get, it's for the retained earnings, and then tutafuta as a debts. Like for retained earnings, the amount it's 1 million, so itakuwa 1 million, you divide by, here you have the source of capital, long-term loan and equity. Equity is 55%. Remember the retained earning is part of equity. So you divide by 0.55. That you'll get 1.82 million. Now, twende kwa debt. Debt tumepewa ngapi? So now, under the debt, here you are given that the company present loan commitment will allow it to incur additional leverage according to the schedule presented below. So we have the loan amount and we have the interest rate there. So utatafuta break even ya 500, year 9 na anything above. So kuna 500, kuna 900, and then above. What does that mean? So for the debt, kuna hiyo ya kwanza which is between 0 to 500. Kwa hivyo utachukua 0.5 million, you divide by the weight of the debt. ya equity ilikuwa 0.55. Kwa hivyo ya debt it was 0.45. And that one you get 1.1. So that means, tuangalie hapa. You see between 0 to 500, it was 9%. So that's, this means that anything below 1.11, tutatumia an interest rate of 9%. Twende hiyo ingine ya pili. Hiyo ingine ilikuwa between 500 to 900. Kwa hivyo hapa our limit is 900. Interest itakuwa 11%. So that means that the other one, you take 0.9, you divide by the proportion of the debt does not change, it's 0.45. By that, you get 2. So, na hapo rate ulikuwa umepewa ni 11%. This means that anything between 1.11 to 2, the interest rate will be 11%. And then ulikuwa umeambiwa 900 and above, it will be 13%. So what does that mean? You see, you already have for this 900. So that means anything above 2 million, interest itakuwa 13%. Wacha nirudi hapa tena. Judy Kinya, I can see hapa unapotea kidogo. So the first breakpoint was between 0 to 500. It's just 0.5, you divide by the rate, which is 1.1. And the interest rate there was 9%. Then anything between 500,000 and 900,000, it was 11%. So you take the 0.9, you divide by 0.45, you get 2. So that means anything now above 1.11 to 2 million, the interest rate will be 11%. Now anything now above the 2 million, that's when you go to the most expensive at 13%. Rahisi tu hivyo. And remember the rate given here, the rates you are given there, interest rate on incremental debt. You see this one is not net of tax. So you can decide to work with the way they are, or you can just multiply by 1 minus t, the way it is. So it's your option. Remember, you say the cost of the debt should be net of tax. You can multiply by 0.7, 0.7, 0.7, or you work with the way it is. You deduct it under the WMCC. So kama hii retained earnings, you see hapa kulikuwa na cost of retained earning of 15.5. That means under equity, anything below 1.82 million, under equity, anything below 1.82 million, we shall use the cost of retained earnings, which is 15.5%. Ikishapita 1.82 under the equity, that's when you go to the cost of ordinary share, which is expensive at 16.67. Good, hiyo imeisha hivyo. Let's go to part 2 of the question. Part 2 anauliza, the weighted marginal cost of capital in each of the intervals between the break in the WMCC schedule 6. So wanauliza WMCC at the interval between the breaks. So how do we determine that? Tulisema, how do you determine the number of breaks to compute? WMCC is weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus tax. In this case, we are not given the preference share. That's why I have omitted the preference share. Now, how to determine the breaks? So tuangalie hapa, what will guide you is this, the breaks here. So for example, hapa unachukua between 0 to, unachukua the minimum break point hapa, and the minimum break point there, it's 1.11. 1.11. Then unasema anything above 1.11 to the next list, which is we have 1.82 to 1.82. Then anything above 1.82 to the next, which is 2, and then above 2. Hivyo ndio tutafanya sasa. So you take the weight of equity. You already given the weight of equity here. The weight of equity was 0.55. Kama ndio hiyo hapo, the source of capital. You can see here we have the long-term debt, which is 45, and the equity is 55. So the weight of equity is 0.55. You multiply by cost of equity. Cost of equity tumesema ni mbili hapa. You see the break point. The break point for retained earning was 1.82. So anything below 1.82, we shall be using the cost of retained earning, which is 15.5. Anything below 1.82. So kwa hivyo hii ya kwanza itakuwa 15.5. Also this one is below that, or it's within that range. So it will be 15.5. Ikishapita 1.82, that's when we use the cost of ordinary share, which is now 16.67. We are still under equity. That's why inamalizana na equity peke yake, which will be 16.67, 16.67. Plus weight of the debt. Equity was 55, the debt was 45. It's 0.45. You multiply by the cost of the debt. Now, for the cost of the debt, tukuje hapa. You see the debt ni hizi sasa. This is what you have for the debt. Anything below 1.11, the interest rate will be 9%. So for example, hii, you see between 0 to 1.11, the interest rate itakuwa 9. Anything between 1.11 to 2, that range, the interest rate inapanda to 11%. So now from 1.11 to 2 ni 11. So iko itakuwa 11. Also this one is in between that range, should be still be 11. Anything above 2, that's when we are using 13%. 13%. And remember, there is something I explained that the cost given here, hauko umetoa tax. So now you can minus it there. 1 minus 0.3, 1 minus 0.3, 1 minus 0.3, 1 minus 0.3. Or instead of writing 9, in the same na kufanya 9 times 0.7 unapata. Now what you take there ndio utaleta hapo. So this one you will get 11.36, 12, 12.63, and this one will be 13%. And we are through with that. So let's go to part 3 of the question. Part 3, the internal rate of return for project A and C, IRR, for both A and C. Yeah, that's formula you need to run from the capital budgeting. And how do we get that? Let me give you the formula. Now, IRR, you take the present value of cash outflow. This when they are with a specific, for the specific period. You take the present value of cash outflow, you divide by the annuity. Hapa tumeulizwa for A and for C, project A and C. So utakuja hapo. Project A, we have the outlay and we have the annual net cash flow. This annual net cash flow is the annuity. And this one is the present value of cash outflow. For A itakuwa 675,000, you divide by 155,401. And for C, you'll take 375,000, you divide by 161,524. So this one, we have seen that it was 675,000. You divide by its annuity, it's 155,401. Then for C, it's 375, that's the outflow. And the annuity was 161,524. 524. So now give me the answer, and you give me into at least give me into 4 decimal places. I want the answer into 4 decimal places, kindly. Mpata ngapi ya kwanza? For A or for C? Wengine wafanya A, the wengine wafanya C. And give me into 4 decimal places, kindly. Yeah, A it's 4.3436. Yote mmefanya A. What about C? Yeah, C is 2.3216. Good. Now, tuangalie hapa. These are not the IRR. We are looking at IRR. What you have gotten here is not IRR. Now, this is how you compute IRR. This is how you compute the IRR. For example, for project A, the project economic life was 8 years. For project C, the economic life was 3 years, 8 and 3. So, hii ni miaka 8 na hii ni miaka 3. How do we get the IRR? So, you just come here. You go to the table. Yeah. Unakuja kwa that table, you come to the annuity. Unakuja kwa annuity. For example, the first one for A, it's 4.3436 for 8 years. So, unakuja hapa kwa annuity table, unaenda kwa mwaka wa 8, the 8th year. Kwa mwaka wa 8, uingie ndani, and then you scan for 4.3436. So, ukuje hapa. Yeah, have you seen it? 4. Hiyo hapo 4.3436. Unaenda for the 8th year mpaka hapo. So that is 16%. So that means for that one, the IRR is 16%. The other one was for project C. Project C, it was for 3 years. You go to the annuity table for the 3rd year, and then you look for 2.3216. So ukuje hapa for the 3rd year, we are looking for 2.3216. Ndio hii 2.3216, which is 14%. Good. I think we are through with that. That was part number 3. Now let's go to note number 4. Required number 4. Number 4, using the investment opportunity schedule, advice on which project should be accepted. Which one to accept? Tulisema which one to accept? Only accept if IRR is greater than WMCC. So we come up with that schedule, investment opportunity or IRR, MCC, WMCC schedule. You develop it like that. Tulisema you bring the project or you rank the project. The good thing with the project givens here, tulisema you rank them based on the IRR. Already hapa zimepangwa vizuri, because the A tumepata IRR yake was 16%. For A was 16%, which is the highest. For B it's 15. For C tumepata ni 14%, 12 and 11. So for this project, they have been ranked based on the IRR. Assuming they were not ranked, you rank on yourself. So you automate a project there, then the cost, then accumulated cost, IRR, WMCC, and then you comment. We had project A, B, C, D, and E. These already zilikuwa zimerankiwa. Then we have the outlay. Outlay ndio outflow, the cash outlay there. So I want to put them in thousand, right? Like the first one itakuwa 0.675. So this one will be 0.675. The other one was 0.9, or 900,000, 0.375, 0.5625, and this one was 0.75. Then we accumulate, like this one itakuwa 0.675. Then you add 0.675, you add 0.9, you get 1.575. 1.575, you add 0.375. That one you get 1.95, 2.5125, and 3.2625. Then you bring the IRR. Project A tumetafuta tukaona was 16%. Project B already given it's 15%. Project C we have computed was 14%. And for project D, yeah, project D is 12 and 11. So we have 12% and 11. Then we go to the WMCC. For the WMCC, we already have them here. And you say that, how do you get the WMCC? To get the WMCC, you use the accumulated cost. So for example, the first one for A, it's 0.675. Unakuja hapa, unaangalia the ranges, 0.65 iko hapa. Yeah, 0.675, 0 is in between here. So that means the WMCC will be 11.36. So 11.36. Then the other one is 1.575. 1.575. 1.575 iko in between here, between 1.11 to 1.82, and the WMCC will be 12. So unaweka 12 hapo. The other one is 1.95. Unakuja hapa. 1.95 is in between here, so it will be 12.63. Then the other one is 2.5125. Iko hapo. So 2.5, it's already above 2. Anything above 2, WMCC, it's 13. So kwa hivyo itakuwa 13, hata ingine itakuwa 13. So 16 and 11, accept, reject, andika answer hapo. Should we accept or should we reject? Yeah, this one you should accept. Hata if 15 is greater than 12, also accept. 14 and 12, also you should accept. But this one you reject. This one you reject. If you ask to get the optimal capital budget, you have accepted 3, 1, 2, 3. Unakuja hizo, you just take the accumulated cost. So that means you need a capital of 1.95, or you can do this. Since you have accepted the 3, uchukue cost of the first, ya A, ya B, na C. If you add the 3, you should get 1.95. So I want to give you some assignments. Go and try this question. Go and try May 2016, question 3. Fanya hiyo yote. Also, you can try June 2009, question 2. But kindly attempt this. If you're able to tackle this, you can be able to tackle the other one. So you can screenshot that. So that's the end of today's class. So now I want to give you this opportunity to you now. Ask the live questions. In case you have a question, a compliment. So Furo ni yako sasa. In case you have a question, just raise your hand. And then kindly try to go and attempt my assignment. Jaribu my assignment. So do your assignment, then send to me. And then for those who have been sending to me, kindly I urge you to use the cam scanner. Scan your work. Usianze kupiga picha, mimi usinitumie picha. So kindly use the cam scanner. You can download the cam scanner. You just scan. Then when you're scanning, kindly scan and save you using what we call the magic color. For those who are having the cam scanner, it's just a phone app. You don't have to buy a scanner there. Yeah. Nimesema mtu msiandike hapo, I'm not reading for the text. Inua tu mkono uniambie, hiyo sisomi hata sioni. So kindly when I was saying that when submitting my assignment, kindly scan your work in PDF, and then you send to me as one document. And then tumesema for the cam scanner you save using the magic color. The magic color is the best. So now you'll be unmuted. Eh? Unmute. Just finya mara moja, mbili, tatu until it's unmuted. Eh? Yes, David.
Mine is a request.
Yeah, which request?
It's about the works that you have done today to share.
Sorry, I share that. Hey, David.
Hello.
Umepotea tena? It seems David amepotea. Anyone else? David. So now let's go to the next patient. Yes, where is he patient? Ongea. Brancho Monio.
Yes, Malim.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Now it's your turn. You're on the floor now.
Yes, I wanted to ask,
Uh-huh.
or maybe a request. Is there a way that we can be able to have a playback of the videos we've been having? Sometimes one may forget one or two things.
Yes, we say. Okay, let me explain. I think I explained to this class. If I never explained to this class, we said that for now, kindly you need to follow the right classes. For the recordings,
yes,
those who are eligible to get the recording, they are those who have paid for the whole package. That means for the whole package, you have paid for the live classes, and then you can get the recordings. But for now, you're not sharing the recordings, kindly. For now, we cannot share the recordings because we say that we are sharing the recordings, and then people also send to other groups. You see? So that one we get is stagnating in the market. So we cannot risk sending to specific students. So what we are doing, we are almost finalizing on our app. So when the app is out, now you can be able, as a student, we open an account for you. Then from there, you can be able to see all the classes we have covered, from the first class to the last class.
So you'll open for us the accounts on your end.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
yeah. Once the app is finished.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Karibu. Judy, uliza. Usiinue mkono hivyo. Inua hapo. So that we can unmute you, eh? So we have Angelica there. Yeah, Jonathan. Jonathan.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's your turn.
Okay, mine is just a compliment. The classes are super well. We are learning a lot. So
Thank
I
you.
wanted to, I wanted to request now that CASNEP has extended up to September. If we can cover everything, including blocks, we are ready for everything, sir. If it's possible.
So now, assuming the exam was to be done on July, assuming they have not extended. Yeah. So my target, I was to complete the syllabus by then, by July.
Okay. Okay.
So that means high chances by July, like AFM tumebakisha topic mbili. Do you know that?
Yeah? Okay, some like me came late for real.
If you came late,
yeah.
Have you been paying per class, or you have subscribed for the whole package?
Up to now per class.
Per class,
Yes.
Now I can urge you to subscribe for the whole, instead of paying per class,
Okay.
You can just pay for that 500, you get the entire package. That means you're able to get all the right classes for free, and then we'll open an account for you where you can be able to review all the other topics we have already done. So that's what I can advise.
That's
yeah, because for those who are paying 250, wonderful. Those paying 250, 250, 250, 250, mambo ya recordings hiyo tutajua baadaye. But for those who have subscribed for the whole package, that one they can get.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So mwenye anachanuka anafaa kufanya hivyo. Yeah, just pay for the whole package instead of per class. Paul.
Yes.
It's your turn.
Oh, Ian Mark. Nanisikia?
Tunakusikia.
It's okay. First, I'd like to say, I'd like to congratulate you for the presentation.
I'm humble.
Presentation iko sawa kabisa. Yeah. Then, let's go to this formula.
Sorry?
I'm saying, there's something I need clarification. Cost of capital, cost of equity. We have D naught 1 plus D. Plus another G.
Yeah.
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 I need some clarification on that. So when do we use the G and when do we omit the D?
Okay, we say that. We say if you are given D01 plus D, that means you are taking the previous dividend and you're expecting it to grow by a certain rate. That's when you use that. So assuming the last time you got a dividend of 5, and then you expect the dividend to grow at 5%. So you'll take the 5, the dividend you got last time, plus 1 plus D. You expect it to grow at the rate maybe at 6%, 1 plus 6. That's how you use the G. Okay. The first question we did, we never added that.
Okay.
Because you already told what to expect.
Yeah, I know.
In that case, you are told that instead of giving the previous year dividend, you are given the dividend we repay you in the next period. So in that case, you're already given D1. So in that case, you don't expect it to grow. It's already, they have already included the growth rate when determining that dividend.
Okay.
Zaidi.
Iko sawa kabisa. Iko sawa kabisa.
Okay, sawa.
Thanks a lot.
Tuende kwa hiyo mwingine. There is Jogona there. Jogona?
Yes.
How are you?
I'm very fine.
Yes, the politician,
Hi, Sulu. I was experimenting on how to raise my hand, so I don't think I had an issue. So then I found that I.
Ulikuwa unajifunza kuinua mkono
Yeah. Sina shida, niko sawa.
So I think now we are good. Anyone else has Paul ameuliza swali? Paul, ukishapewa chance unaweka mkono chini.
Oh. Okay, sawa.
So I think now we are okay. Good. So wish you all the best. Kindly keep on revising. I want my student to get an award for this, for all my units. Tafadhalini. So kindly keep on reading. Eh? So revise, 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 revise. For me, I'm reachable anytime. Hapana, not anytime. Eh? For me, I'm reachable. So in case you do assignment, kindly feel free to ask. Na kindly, mwenye ananiuliza swali na text, kindly staki text. Tuma WhatsApp. Don't request note unanitumia text, eh? Nitumie notes na umenitumia kwa SMS. Unataka nikutumia aje note kwa SMS? So you inbox me WhatsApp. Good. Damaris, unataka kusoma na mtoto? So that's the end of today's class. Have a nice evening.